Hello, my beautiful earthlings, and welcome back to season 2 of Soulful Wahine. I just want to take a quick second to say how happy I am to even be saying those words again. These past few weeks, folks, I have just taken time to really kind of just recalibrate my life and really just take a look at where I want things to go with Soulful Wahine. And I've honestly been putting a lot of thought into how I wanted to open this season up because I didn't want our first conversation back to feel like another psychology lesson. To be honest, I think I did a lot of that, or maybe even enough of that in season 1. And so today specifically, I wanted this conversation to feel like two friends sitting down and having a discussion about a topic that is honestly, in my opinion, a little difficult to explain, but truly impossible to ignore over time. And so I wanted to open up today's episode with a question that's been on my mind lately. How can someone feel emotionally lonely even when they're surrounded by people who love them? And I wanted to open this discussion up, folks, because I don't think that this is a topic that we touch on enough, or if ever. Because I feel like for most of us, when we hear the word lonely, we typically picture the wrong thing. From my experience, I feel like we've been defining the word loneliness wrong, or we've been looking at it through the wrong lens, if you may. When most people hear the word loneliness, they typically picture someone in isolation. They picture someone with no friends, no family, no real support system. But in my personal opinion, folks, I don't think that that's the type of loneliness that confuses people. I think the harder loneliness to explain is when we leave a room full of people who we know for a fact love us, yet somehow we still walk away feeling emotionally alone. And I think that's exactly why so many people start to question their own experiences. One thing that I've noticed is instead of asking ourselves why we feel lonely, many of us immediately start feeling guilty for even feeling that way. The thoughts that we typically have sound something like, well, my family loves me, or other people have it worse, or maybe even, I'm probably just being dramatic. Before we even have allowed ourselves to explore our emotions, we have already convinced ourselves that they aren't valid. And I just wonder how many people have spent years talking themselves out of what they were genuinely feeling. And maybe that's because we've been asking ourselves the wrong questions all along. One thing I've noticed, guys, is as I'm trying to, work on my skills of public speaking and all of that, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think the Portuguese in me will ever go away. The way I talk with my hands. I don't know why, but just reading that last slide, I just realized my hands were like, and so I'm like, it is a part of me. It is what it is. At the end of the day, I talk with my hands, and I feel like that's okay. When I say I feel like we've been asking the wrong questions, I mean, instead of asking questions like, did the people in my life love me? I wonder if a better question to ask ourselves is, how did the people in my life express love? Because those are two very different conversations. One asks whether love existed, while the other asks what love looked like. And I think that's where this conversation begins. Because love can look beautiful while still leaving emotional needs unmet. And that's just something I want folks to think about. One thing that I've had to learn and accept, folks, is that love doesn't always look the way that we need it to. Okay? For some of us, love sounded like, did you eat today? Call me when you get there, or let me know if you need anything. While other families, love looked like working overtime, cooking dinner every night, paying the bills, or even always showing up when someone needed help. And I want to take a moment, folks, and recognize that those are indeed real acts of love. And I never want to take away from that, okay? But even while all of that is happening, some people were never asked, well, how are you doing? Like, really? How are you? And I think that's where feeling loved and feeling known begin to separate from each other. As a therapist, I have learned that feeling loved is absolutely not the same thing as feeling known. I think most of us know what it feels like to be loved, but feeling known is something completely different. Feeling known is when someone notices that your eyes don't match your smile. It's someone saying, hey, you seem different today. Or, you don't have to pretend with me. Or you can tell me what's really going on. It's someone making space for your inner world instead of only responding to what everyone else knows. And those moments can definitely change and impact the way a person experiences connection. So, how does that happen? And one thing that I've learned in social work, folks, there's this acronym. It's called PI, Person in Environment. And I think the answer has a lot to do with the environments that we were all raised in. For many of us, our families were doing their absolute best to survive. When I think about our parents and our grandparents and even the generations before them, I think about everything that they were carrying. Fun fact, you guys, my grandma, not even my great grandma, my grandma, my paternal grandmother, she was born before Hawaii became a state. That's how recent it is. And so it's like when I think about that, when I think about what, guys, I told myself I wouldn't cry too much this season, and I don't even know why. No, I know why. I'm an emotional person. I've accepted that. I'm an emotional person. Um, but when I think about my grandma and I just think about like my kupuna and just all the elderly and just our ancestors and the generations before us, it just really makes me question the things that they were carrying and how they carried them. Many families were trying to survive things such as financial stress, addiction, grief, racism, generational trauma, and immigration, or even displacement. And so when survival becomes the priority, emotional conversations often get put on the back burner and they become secondary. Not because people don't care, but because they're running on empty. Their cup is depleted. There is nothing else that they can pour into because there's nothing to pour from. And children who grow up in these environments naturally begin to adapt to what feels safest. Does that sound familiar for any of you? One thing, don't mind me, guys, I'm over here eating my damn snack. One thing that I always remind parents and clients is children are resilient, meaning that children don't just listen to us, folks. They learn how to adapt and they do it quickly, even if we don't recognize it. Children are constantly learning what helps them stay connected. Without even realizing it, many of them begin to almost subconsciously ask themselves, what do I need to do to belong here? And so from there, maybe they learn to be the funny one, the easy one, the independent one. Not because that's who they truly are, but because those versions of themselves feel safest. But here's the part that I don't think we talk about enough. Intermission. 5 bananas. I truly don't know how people don't like bananas. Like, shit is yummy. But I also fucking hate dragon fruit, and some people love dragon fruit, so I can't talk shit. Okay. When you spend years believing that certain parts of yourself are easier to love than others, you slowly stop bringing your whole self into relationships. Meaning those parts of yourself that you are ashamed of, we typically learn how to kind of hide those or even leave those completely behind. People begin knowing the version of you that's helpful, dependable, funny, or successful. Meanwhile, the parts of you that feel overwhelmed, scared, confused, or deeply emotional oftentimes stay hidden. And if the deepest parts of you never get seen, is it any wonder that you can be surrounded by love and yet still feel so emotionally alone? Because every way that we learn to protect ourselves eventually asks us to pay a price. And I don't think that that's something that many of us realize. The interesting thing, though, is when it comes to adapting, it works. At least for a while. Learning to become the easy one, the independent one, the funny one, the successful one, often helps us stay connected to the people that we love. And as children, that's exactly what we're supposed to do. We adapt. But every adaptation asks us to give up something. Sometimes we give up asking for help, expressing difficult emotions, letting people see us struggle, or believing that our needs matter too. Eventually, protecting the relationship becomes more familiar than revealing ourselves. And over time, that changes the questions that we begin to ask ourselves. Are you following? When we're younger, we usually wonder things like, do the people in my life love me? But after years of hiding certain parts of ourselves, the question often changes into something much quieter. Something like, would they still love me if they really knew me? And there's a huge difference in those questions, folks. One wonders if love exists, and the other wonders if love can survive authenticity. I think that's where emotional loneliness starts becoming much deeper than simply feeling alone. I think emotional loneliness carries a different type of grief that many people don't recognize. Because when it comes to emotional loneliness, you're grieving experiences that you've never had. Maybe you're grieving conversations that never happened, emotional safety that you wish existed. Maybe you're grieving feeling deeply understood. And it's difficult to miss something that you've never experienced, yes. But somehow our hearts still recognize that at one moment or another, that was something that we longed for. And I think that's why so many people feel guilty for grieving something that they can't even fully explain. Since we're on the topic of grief, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is believing that we have to choose one or the other. Meaning we have to choose the story of either my family loved me or something was missing. And I don't think healing is asking us to choose. I think it asks us to hold both of those with honesty. You can be incredibly grateful for everything that someone gave you while still acknowledging the places where you wished they knew how to love you differently. Because our goal isn't to rewrite our childhood, it's to understand how it continues shaping us today. Okay? One thing that I always try to remind my clients is that your childhood does not stay in your childhood. Meaning, the way that we learned how to connect with people rarely ever stays in our childhood. They quietly follow us into adulthood because they're familiar. Okay? It's simply because that has become our new normal. And that's why emotional loneliness can show up in friendships, in dating, in marriage, even in work relationships. And unfortunately, folks, even in communities where we feel genuinely loved. But I don't think emotional loneliness always looks the way that people expect it to. And this is what I meant, or what I was referring to in the beginning of when we talk about, or when we hear the word loneliness, I feel like a lot of people are picturing the wrong thing. And this is what I mean. This is all tying back together. Following me? Emotional loneliness doesn't always look like sadness. Okay? Sometimes emotional loneliness doesn't look lonely at all. Sometimes it looks like always being the one who listens, being someone who says, I'm fine, without even thinking about it, keeping everyone else's secrets while still sharing very little of your own, and feeling emotionally exhausted for constantly showing up for others. In other words, you are holding space for others, but people are not reciprocating that. People may see someone who's dependable, but they don't always see someone who's quietly longing to be seen and to be known. And I think that's especially important to talk about within our own communities. For me personally, one of the things I love most about being Polynesian and about being a Pacific Islander is how deeply we show up for one another. We love through sacrifice, generosity, loyalty, feeding each other, protecting one another, and showing up when someone needs us. Those are beautiful values, and I hope that we never lose them. At the same time, I think many of us are learning that emotional vulnerability also deserves a seat at that table too. Because strong families aren't only built through sacrifice, they're also strengthened through emotional honesty. And maybe that's where this conversation really comes full circle. The older I've gotten, the more that I've realized that healing isn't about deciding whether the people in my life loved me enough. It's about giving myself permission to stop arguing with myself about my own experiences. I've learned that I can love people deeply. I can appreciate everything that they sacrificed. And I can still acknowledge the moments where I felt emotionally alone. Those truths do not compete with each other. If anything, they help me to understand my story more honestly. And truthfully, I hope that that's something that you can take away from today's conversation. If you remember nothing else from today's episode, I hope you remember this. Love and emotional connection are related, but they are not the same thing. Someone can genuinely love you and still not know how to emotionally meet you where you need them. Recognizing that doesn't erase their love, but it simply gives language to an experience that maybe we've been carrying for years. And so before we end today, I want to leave you all with one final thought. Maybe the question was never, did the people in my life love me? Maybe the question has always been, did I feel safe enough to let myself be known? If today's conversation resonated with you, I hope it gave you permission to stop questioning your own experience. You don't have to choose between gratitude and honesty. You don't have to choose between love and loneliness. Sometimes both have been true all along. And making room for both might be one of the most kindest things that you ever do for yourself. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, especially with today being our season opener. I am so excited for this journey ahead of us, folks. And I cannot thank all of you enough for just being a part of this journey with me. As always, folks, until next time, mahalo and aloha.